Two characters from fiction who truly embody raw, untamed power are Kenpachi Zaraki from Bleach and Broly from Dragon Ball. For the majority of the series, Kenpachi had carved out a name for himself with nothing but his pure battle instinct combined with his weathered, nameless Zanpakuto. On the other hand, you have Broly, a pure-hearted Saiyan whose latent abilities had strucken fear into the gods themselves. In today's video, I'm diving into an absolutely insane hypothetical battle as I'm pitting Kenpachi against Broly. What happens when Kenpachi, the unstoppable force of nature who is able to slice through dimensions themselves, finds himself facing off against a legendary Super Saiyan who is able to shatter reality itself? Both of these combatants share a fascinating parallel, as they both wield tremendous power that they have had to learn to control. Otherwise, this incredible amount of power would consume them completely. Kenpachi, who ended up subconsciously limiting his own strength just so that he could enjoy fights longer, in comparison to Broly, whose rage-fueled transformations needed to be controlled through training and developing friendships. This isn't going to be just another who's going to hit harder debate, as I'll be trying to explain what defines true strength. Is it the instincts of Kenpachi as well as his hundreds of years of battle experience, or is it the astronomical power growth and Saiyan heritage that Broly has? Be sure to stick around to the very end of the video as I'll be breaking down both of their abilities, analysing their combat styles, as we'll determine who would emerge victorious in this insane battle. We'll also be looking at the Reishi based power system of Bleach in comparison to the Ki based power system of Dragon Ball. So without further delay, let's dive into this ultimate battle between the strongest Shinigami in the Soul Society versus the legendary Super Saiyan. Before the video begins, only 20% of the people who actually watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. With any versus battle, we need to set the ground rules. Firstly, we need to determine a worthy battlefield which can withstand their immense destructive capabilities. There are only two possible playing fields that I can think of. If the battle was occurring within the Bleach universe, the best place would be Muken, the lowest level of the Soul Society's central underground prison. This is a virtually indestructible dimension where Aizen is currently imprisoned, and it's also the landscape where Unohana had trained Kenpachi during the 1000-year Blood War arc. If the battle was taking place within Dragon Ball, then a comparatively suitable location would be the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. This is a strange dimension which exists outside of the bounds of Universe 7, and it can be accessed via multiple doorways. The boundaries of the Room of Spirit and time stretch to infinity in all directions, and the flow of time within this dimension is compressed, so one day within the outside world will equal 1 year within the time chamber. In terms of the versions of the characters who will be fighting against each other, I want to pick them at their absolute peaks within their respective stories. So for the purposes of this video, I want to take Kenpachi from the Can't Be Your Own World light novels, which are set 6 months following the events of the 1000-year Blood War arc. And to be specific, this is the version of Kenpachi who had fought against the hybrid being Hikone. On the other hand, we have Broly, and to clarify, this is the version of Broly from his appearances within Dragon Ball Super, not to be confused with the toy animation version of Broly who appears within movies 8, 10 and 11. So I'll be looking at Broly's feats from the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, as well as any appearances that he has made within the Dragon Ball Super manga, and in the movie Dragon Ball Super Superhero. So both respective versions of these characters are at their absolute strongest, with Kenpachi having mastered his Bankai presumably, and Broly having gained better control over his transformations. So in terms of some restrictions, both of them will be relying solely on their own abilities. Kenpachi's energy ceiling eye patch as well as Broly's control collar are removed, thus allowing them to fight at their full capacity from the beginning of the battle. And in order to determine a victor, the battle continues until one of them is completely incapacitated or defeated. Both of these fighters are known for their insane amounts of durability as well as their regenerative abilities, so a simple knockout may not be enough, because knowing Broly or Kenpachi, they'd simply get back up within a few minutes. So one of them needs to definitely
be able to overcome the other's fighting spirit as well as endurance. Let's now do a basic overview of each of the combatants. So Kenpachi Zaraki stands out as one of the Soul Society's most powerful captains. He embodies the raw power of combat in its purest form. He is from the lawless 80th district of Rukongai called Zaraki, and from a young age he had proven himself to be one of the strongest as he had carved his path through countless battles, eventually going on to claim the title of Kenpachi for himself, which is reserved for the strongest Shinigami of any given generation. He had started as a nameless child fighting in the streets to becoming the captain of the 11th Division. These achievements are a testament to his unrelenting pursuit of stronger opponents and a more challenging battle. Within the universe of Bleach, no other character is as similar to the nature of the Saiyans as Kenpachi, as he not only grows stronger with each battle, but he lives just to fight against strong opponents, which is very much like the Saiyans. Kenpachi is one of the few Shinigami to have survived a prolonged battle against Unohana Yachiru. She was in fact the first generation original Kenpachi. Before she had joined Yamamoto's original Gotei 13, she was referred to as one of the most diabolical criminals within the history of the Soul Society. In his youth, Kenpachi had so much power that he was actually stronger than this version of Unohana. He was enjoying his battle against her so much that he ended up putting subconscious restrictions upon himself, so in other words, weakening himself so that he could continue fighting her for longer. These restrictions had remained in place ever since his original battle with Unohana, and we don't see Kenpachi with his full untapped potential until his training with Unohana during the 1000-Year Blood War arc. Before this, we had seen Kenpachi clash against Ichigo as well as Noitara, where he had demonstrated his ability to adapt mid-battle, as he was able to overwhelm the Espada's impenetrable defense simply by wielding his Zanpakuto with two hands. One of Kenpachi's most impressive feats within the Bleach manga is where he had destroyed a meteor that was summoned by Grammy with just a single strike by using his Shikai no Zarashi. In the 1000-Year Blood War arc, he also proved himself capable of pressuring beings as powerful as Gerard Valkyrie when he had activated his Bankai and had transformed into that demonic Oni-like creature. What makes Kenpachi really interesting isn't just that he has insane amounts of raw power, but it's how he is able to control and use it. Kenpachi's fighting style combines brutal efficiency with his equally impressive battle instincts, which makes him a fighting genius. Going into most of his battles, Kenpachi intentionally handicaps himself by concealing his powers with an eye patch as well as wearing bells in his hair so that his opponent is able to easily locate him. This is just so that he doesn't defeat his opponents too quickly and so that he can prolong his fights to enjoy them. Towards the later portions of the story, Kenpachi discovers the name of his Zanpakuto, which is Nozarashi. Via this discovery, it allows him to wield a massive weapon that is capable of cutting through space itself. When Kenpachi is pushed to his absolute limits, he can activate his Bankai, which allows him to cut through anything. However, because of the pure destructive nature of his Bankai and his lack of control over this newly awakened form, it results in Kenpachi's body tearing apart because of the overwhelming power. Kenpachi's combat style is highly adaptable, as he doesn't really rely on predetermined techniques or strategies, and for the most part he adapts and evolves during battle, consistently breaking through his own limitations, and this was most evident during his fight against Grammy, where he adapted to increasingly abstract and reality warping attacks from the Sternritter, who possesses the broken ability called the Visionary, which essentially allows him to bring anything from his imagination into reality, and Kenpachi was able to challenge this just with his sheer force of will and his combat intuition. Until his training with Unohana, Kenpachi had gotten stronger from each battle because he was gradually removing the limitations that he had subconsciously placed upon himself. Following his training, he had removed all of these subconscious restrictions, and he was finally able to hear the voice of his Zanpakuto, which had allowed him to reach his full potential. In terms of raw combat ability, Kenpachi's spiritual pressure alone is enough to paralyze most opponents. Then you have his durability, which makes him invincible to attacks from weaker opponents. Even when Kenpachi is severely wounded, he has demonstrated that he can continue fighting at peak levels of power. We see this in the 1000-Year Blood War arc during his fights against the Sternritter. Contrastingly, Broly is one of the most interesting additions to the lore of Dragon Ball Super. A lot of people, including myself, were pleasantly surprised when Broly was announced to be returning for a new Dragon Ball movie. Unlike his counterpart from the Dragon Ball Z movies, this super version of Broly presents a more nuanced character. Broly from Dragon Ball Super has unprecedented potential, and he has spent decades isolated on a planet called Vampa. His story is one of isolation and raw power, and he was shaped by his father Paragus's vengeful ambitions rather than him being innately evil. What makes Broly so interesting is his tremendous power, which develops not from training or technique, but from pure unrefined talent, which we see evolve in real time when he is fighting. Broly has some fairly interesting achievements in battle. His first major battle was when he demonstrated the ability to adapt and grow stronger mid-fight, pushing Super Saiyan Vegeta to his limits before forcing him to escalate to Super Saiyan God. Broly's power escalation continued as he had fought Super Saiyan Blue Goku. His power eventually reached a point where Goku and Vegeta were left no choice but to fuse in order to become Gogeta. Broly's most impressive display of combatability was against Golden Frieza, as he was able to fight against Frieza's strongest form for an hour straight, demonstrating his overwhelming power and insane stamina. The scale of Broly's abilities manifested physically during his battle against Gogeta, where their clash was so intense that it shattered the fabric of reality itself, as they were simultaneously creating and destroying multiple dimensions during their clashes. This feat from Dragon Ball Super Broly places him in an exclusive tier of power within the Dragon Ball universe. Goku had even speculated that Broly may surpass Beerus in raw power. The most impressive thing about Broly is his unique combat evolution. His wrathful state allows him to harness his great ape power while maintaining human form. This multiplies his already insane levels of strength. From his wrathful state, Broly can transform into a conventional Super Saiyan, and then finally we have his legendary Super Saiyan form, or a Super Saiyan full power form, which appears to have no upper limit in terms of its power growth. Broly's fighting style reflects his upbringing, as he battles in a very primal, animalistic fashion, relying solely on instinct rather than refined ability. Broly's abilities include devastating energy blasts like the Gigantic Breath, as well as Planet Crusher. By far, the most dangerous trait that Broly possesses is his adaptive combat ability. The longer that Broly fights his opponent, he intuitively develops counters to their techniques and even replicates complex moves like Goku's Godbind after only having seen it once. The most terrifying aspect of Broly's combat potential is that these displays occurred with virtually no formal training. After the events of the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, Broly actually had started to learn to properly control his powers under the mentorship of Goku. This does suggest that Broly's current power level could be exceptionally higher than what was previously seen. Broly from Dragon Ball Super possesses truly limitless potential, a talent for adapting and evolving his combat ability, as well as raw power, which makes him one of the most strongest warriors within all of Dragon Ball. And it seems like we are not even scratching the surface with him, as he has so much more room to grow even stronger. In order to compare both of their abilities, we need to examine how Kenpachi's Reiatsu would interact with Broly's Ki. Some people have ruled out this fight entirely by stating that, well, Kenpachi is a spiritual being, whereas Broly is a physical one, but they fail to realize that Dragon Ball has its very own spiritual world. During the Buu Saga, when Goku returned to the physical world with a halo above his head, he was able to easily battle against Buu, who was a physical being. And not to forget Goku's battle against Majin Vegeta, and even the energy-absorbing Yakon. You also have the fact that Dragon Ball Super Broly is able to punch and shatter dimensions, so I don't think there would be any issue between these two characters interacting and fighting. You also have the example of Goku transforming into a Super Saiyan 3 while in his spirit body, and this transformation was easily perceived by all of the Z fighters on Earth and even King Kai in Otherworld. Now when we look at the respective energy systems of both Bleach and Dragon Ball, they represent raw spiritual life force, but the way that they manifest within their respective series is different. Kenpachi's Reiatsu operates on a conceptual level, allowing him to cut through abstract concepts like space itself with his Zanpakuto no Zarashi. Meanwhile, Broly's ki demonstrates more direct destructive ability, again capable of shattering through dimensions through the sheer force of his punches. Kenpachi's instinctive combat genius allows him to adapt to and counter previously unseen techniques. He demonstrates this when he figures out how to defeat Gremmy's reality warping visionary power through pure battle intuition. On the other hand, Broly possesses a similar adaptive ability which manifests very differently. Rather than tactical adaptation, Broly's power simply continues to increase in order to overcome any challenge in front of him, as we see when he rapidly evolves from struggling against base level Vegeta to overwhelming Super Saiyan Blue Goku. Each of their respective movesets, while focused on raw combat ability, highlight that the two of them have very different approaches to battle. Kenpachi Zanpakuto being able to cut through space should theoretically be able to counter the high durability of Broly by bypassing conventional physical defense. However, Broly's energy blasts like Planet Crusher and Gigantic Breath give him ranged options that Kenpachi lacks, since he is primarily a close-ranged fighter who loves to put the pressure on the opponent. Broly's Wrathful State and his legendary Super Saiyan transformation offer consistent power increase, while Kenpachi's Bankai provides an enormous power boost, but it also has the weakness of Kenpachi losing control to the point that his body would be unable to contain the raw power of his Bankai. Would Kenpachi's Reiatsu-based attacks be able to harm Broly, since we have seen him show resistance to energy-based attacks from individuals as strong as Gogeta? And then conversely, could Broly's ki-based abilities break through Kenpachi's defenses, which are reinforced by Reiatsu? Both of them possess crazy amounts of brute force and raw power, and their set of abilities is less versatile than you may think, with Broly having more varied energy projections, but Kenpachi having mastery of swordsmanship, and with him demonstrating that he is able to fight effectively even when deprived of his senses, as we see during his battle against Tozen during the Soul Society arc. Both of them have very different strengths, and they both have been shown to continually break through their limits during battle, and they do so in very different means. Broly does so through exponential power growth, whereas Kenpachi does so by removing those self-imposed restrictions. This does make for a fascinating dynamic where both Broly and Kenpachi become stronger as the battle continues. The question then becomes, will Broly's rate of power increase be able to outpace Kenpachi's ability to adapt and overcome? Or would Kenpachi be able to utilize all of the tools at his disposal, including his refined battle instincts, to find a way to end the fight before Broly reaches his maximum potential? Let's turn our attention towards their physical combat. So Kenpachi's raw physical strength manifests in ways that defy basic physics. During his fight against Gerard Valkyrie, he demonstrated the power to halt and redirect the momentum of an opponent whose giant size easily dwarfed skyscrapers, and he had done this with just a single arm. This wasn't just a feat of strength, but a display of how Kenpachi's spiritual pressure reinforces his physical strength. Broly, on the other hand, operates on a scale that threatens the fabric of reality itself. I want to bring this example up again because it best demonstrates Broly's growth and evolution. During Dragon Ball Super Broly, he was able to rapidly evolve from trading blows with base level Vegeta to overwhelming Super Saiyan Blue Goku. The stark difference in power level to when he had started the fight to the point where he's overwhelming Super Saiyan Blue is a level of growth where he had evolved by multiple orders of magnitude. Broly's raw physical punch was able to create dimensional rifts, and this wasn't via any special technique, it was just his physical strength. When we look at both of their speed, this is where things get really interesting. Kenpachi's speed development was quite unusual. While initially relying more on raw reflexes than traditional Shinigami movement techniques like Shumpo, following his training with Unohana, his insane levels of combat speed had manifested during the 1000-year Blood War arc, where he was able to keep up with opponents like Grammy and Gerard. And again, even when he was trapped within Tozen's Bankai, he was able to fight effectively and maintain his speed speed while deprived of all of his senses except for touch. Comparatively, Broly's natural combat speed increases exponentially with each transformation that he undergoes. During his fight against Gogeta, he demonstrated the ability to match an opponent, moving at speeds that made time itself appear to be frozen to outside observers. What's so interesting is how this speed scaled with his rage and power, which suggests that there is no upper limit to the potential velocity that Broly could achieve. Some have dismissed Kenpachi's fighting style, stating that it is nothing more than physical brutality, but in actuality, Kenpachi demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of the fundamentals of combat. For the majority of the series, Kenpachi had no formal training in combat aside from one lesson with head captain Yamamoto, and even then the Central 46 had to stop Kenpachi's training because they were too afraid that he would get so strong that nobody in the Soul Society would be able to stop him if he were to have turned against them. Things changed following his training with Unohana, and it was thanks to this that he was able to analyze and counter the abilities of Grammy, and this demonstrates alone that Kenpachi can adapt to certain battle scenarios. But unfortunately, when there's a situation where his mind needs to be used too much, like when he had confronted Pernida, things can fall apart very quickly. As we had seen with how easily Pernida was able to control and contort Kenpachi's limbs, thus forcing Mayuri to intervene in order to save his life. Similarly, Broly has had very minimal formal training, and he showcases an innate ability to replicate and counter complex techniques after only having seen them once. Like I mentioned earlier, he was able to adapt to Goku's Godbind technique, and he even demonstrated that he could not just copy abilities but understand and improve upon them too. This highlights that Broly has insane combat intelligence. This combined with his genetic Saiyan battle adaptation traits, it makes him a fighter who evolves not just in power but in technical proficiency even in mid-battle. I mean, there reaches a point where you compare these two characters where traditional power scaling becomes almost meaningless. The two of them operate at levels where their physical abilities transcend normal limits, thus making their clashes less about raw numbers and more about how their unique approaches to combat would interact and evolve during their fight. Let's now turn our attention towards both of their intellect and strategic ability. During the 1000 Year Blood War arc, Kenpachi was impressively able to realize that Grammy could only maintain focus on a single target at a time, thus allowing him to rescue Yachiru, whose bones were turned to cookies by Grammy's visionary ability. Kenpachi's quick thinking had ended up turning Grammy's own ability against him, as Grammy had attempted to conceptualize and imagine Kenpachi's raw power, trying to manifest it into his own body, but the Sternritter ended up self-destructing because his body was unable to contain the insane power that Grammy had imagined. Despite Kenpachi admitting that he disregards strategy and he has an aversion to thinking, it has been seen that he is able to find and exploit the weaknesses of his opponents effectively, and he can rapidly adjust to the attack patterns of his enemy. Comparatively, Broly learns and adapts rapidly in battle, and with him only having partaken in training matches against his father, who is way weaker than him and less skilled, his raw talent was so high that it allowed him to continuously keep up and evolve, and even overwhelm both Goku and Vegeta. Goku was so impressed by Broly's ability to fight on an even playing field with Vegeta so early in their fight. Similar to Kenpachi's Bankai transformation, Broly is able to achieve the legendary Super Saiyan form, but at the cost of losing control over his senses. Again, in both cases, it's a lack of experience, with Kenpachi having just activated his Bankai and Broly having just awakened the legendary Super Saiyan form. Both of them have a raw talent for combat, so their learning curves are nearly vertical, and you could say that they not only get stronger but they get smarter in battle, as they can adapt to and counter abilities that they have never seen before with frightening speed. Now, unfortunately for Broly, because of his circumstances, he was shaped by his isolation on Vampa, so in battle he entirely relies on improvisation, as he has a lack of any formal training or battle experience. This means that he has an intuitive understanding of combat, which is both his greatest strength and weakness. Every battle that Broly takes part in is a learning experience for him, and this is in stark contrast to Kenpachi, who's been fighting for centuries. His countless battles across the decades that that he has spent within the Soul Society have given him an encyclopedic understanding of combat scenarios. I'm gonna mention it again because it was so impressive. When he had fought against Tozen's Bankai, Kenpachi proved that his battle experience had allowed him to adapt even when he was deprived of his basic senses, because mid-battle he discovered new ways to detect and counter Tozen. Broly's fight against Gogeta exposed him to power levels which transcended dimensional boundaries, and it had forced him to evolve at rates which would shatter most fighters. The intensity of these experiences compressed centuries worth of combat learning into hours of fight time for Broly. Both fighters have proven that they can break through their own limitations in mid-combat. Within Bleach, we even see Byakuya impressed by Kenpachi's innate ability to understand that which he has had no experience with before. So in essence, you have all of Kenpachi's combat experience and his adaptability versus Broly's instinctive Saiyan genes, which make him a battle genius, granting him an exponential learning curve where Kenpachi has no choice but to use all of his experience and intellect to defeat Broly before he learns too much during their fight and the scale tips in his favor. I want to now turn our attention towards their durability and stamina. Let's see how much punishment each of them can endure and still maintain combat effectiveness. Kenpachi's durability is way beyond the normal limits of a spiritual being. Kenpachi proved that he could withstand the imagination of Grammy, as his body was very resistant to the physical trauma that it was exposed to via all of the conceptual forces that were used against him. During the Soul Society arc, we had seen Kenpachi stand and take an attack from a captain level Shinigami without being phased. More impressively, when he had faced off against Pernita's ability to compulsory, which can warp the limbs of his opponents, Kenpachi simply tore off his affected arm and continued fighting the Sternritter. This proves that Kenpachi's durability isn't just about him withstanding damage, but about maintaining his ability to fight even while sustaining critical injuries, which would normally take out or kill most individuals. In comparison, Broly's durability is on an entirely different level. His legendary Super Saiyan form adapts and strengthens him mid-battle. This enables him to withstand attacks which previously would have wounded him. During his fight with Gogeta, he survived attacks which literally shattered reality around them. I did mention this earlier, but his most impressive feat of durability was his hour-long battle with Golden Frieza, where despite taking hits from one of Universe 7's most powerful fighters, Broly emerged virtually unscathed. His durability seems to scale with his rage and power level, suggesting that again he has no clear upper limit to this stat. Kenpachi's stamina is at insane levels. After he was mortally wounded multiple times during his training with Unohana, and he was healed by her, and this process had repeated multiple times, with Kenpachi growing stronger every time that he was healed. This wasn't just endurance, but a demonstration of how his fighting spirit enhances his abilities. When Kenpachi was subjected to the vacuum of outer space, and even when a meteorite was falling down onto the Serete, Kenpachi was able to withstand all of this thanks to his insane will, which hardly ever depletes his stamina. Kenpachi has proven that he can continue fighting despite sustaining severe injuries like deep cuts to the neck, multiple holes to his chest, even when he has torn limbs off of his body. Broly maintains his combat effectiveness through multiple transformations which put immense strain on his body, but somehow he still maintains his stamina, and this feat alone exceeds the standards that have been set by Goku and Vegeta. The fact that he was able to maintain the stamina to fight Gogeta at these insane levels of power after already having fought both Vegeta and Goku separately suggests that Broly's stamina reserves grow alongside with his power. Kenpachi's fighting style does often involve him deliberately getting hit in order to create and exploit openings against his opponent. Naturally, he would need to have insane levels of durability and stamina in order to sustain such a strategy, while contrastingly, Broly becomes increasingly difficult to damage the longer that you fight him, with his stamina endlessly increasing and feeding into his endless cycle of power growth. So you have a situation where as their battle continues, both of them would become more and more resilient, with Kenpachi's stamina and durability increasing via his sheer will and spiritual pressure, with Broly's stats ever increasing with his ability to adapt and evolve in battle. I want to look at each of their respective ultimate moves and forms. So Kenpachi's unnamed Bankai is the absolute peak of his power, but because it is so unrefined, it works as a bit of a double-edged sword. His Bankai transforms him into a demonic entity focused on pure destruction. It grants him power which eclipses most other Shinigami, and what makes his Bankai fascinating is how it manifests not just as a power boost, but as a complete change in appearance. His skin transforms into red, horns grow from his head, and his sword transforms into a cleaver that can cut beings as strong as Gerard Valkyrie in half. His Bankai is literally the power to cut anything. Comparatively with Broly, unlike normal Super Saiyan transformations which have defined limits, Broly's legendary Super Saiyan form operates on a principle of continuous evolution. His gigantic breath and planet crusher techniques aren't just energy attacks, they are manifestations of power which are so intense that they can tear holes between dimensions. All of Broly's abilities grow far stronger the more that he accumulates combat experience. In terms of weaknesses, Kenpachi's Bankai does have a fundamental flaw. It's that it releases more power than Kenpachi's body can physically contain. During his battle with Gerard, this manifested in his own body beginning to tear itself apart. This had started with the arm that he was holding his Zanpakuto in shattering under the strain of his power. The first and only time that we see Kenpachi use his Bankai, it renders him virtually mindless, as he is unable to distinguish between friend and foe, and instead of relying on his intellect and combat experience, he pretty much becomes a berserker, fighting purely on instinct. Similarly, while Broly's power growth is limitless, his control over it is far from perfect. Even training with Goku, he struggles to maintain conscious control in his most powerful states. This creates a situation where Broly's greatest strength, which is his unlimited potential, becomes a liability to him, as he risks losing tactical awareness just when his power reaches its peak. If Kenpachi's Bankai that can cut through anything collides with Broly's reality-shattering power of his legendary Super Saiyan form, then we're talking about a clash which would have multiversal implications. Kenpachi's Bankai would provide him an immediate, overwhelming power increase, but it has a strict time limit which is imposed by his body's own limitations. Conversely, you have Broly's power increases which are exponential over time with no clear limit to them. If Kenpachi has any chance of winning, then he would need to work really fast and end the fight before his body gives out, or before Broly's continuous evolution outpaces Kenpachi's power increase, thus allowing Broly to effortlessly overwhelm Kenpachi's most strongest attacks. Because yes, while Kenpachi has the ability to cut through anything, how would this interact with Broly's ever-increasing durability? I want to now look at some wild card possibilities which could turn the tide of battle in unexpected ways. I think that this matchup does offer some fascinating psychological and circumstantial factors which may influence the outcome of this fight. Firstly, you have the very different relationships that each of these characters have with battle itself. Kenpachi's entire identity revolves around seeking a worthy opponent and deliberately extending his fights for enjoyment. His tendency to hold back against an opponent as strong as Broly could prove to be fatal. While Kenpachi does all of this in order to prolong fights and to savor the joy of combat, with the way that Broly's power escalation works, it's on a scale that would punish anybody who hesitates against him. There's also an interesting way in the two of them process rage. Kenpachi's Bankai transforms him into a mindless berserker, while Broly's legendary Super Saiyan transformation also makes him lose his sense of control. However, recently within Dragon Ball Super Superhero and even in the Dragon Ball Super manga, under Goku's mentorship, Broly has gradually been gaining mastery over his different transformations. This may give him an unexpected tactical advantage, but again, while saying this, we know very little about Kenpachi's Bankai and how much time he has been allowed to dedicate to mastering it. Within Bleach, it has been stated by Yoruichi that it takes 10 years to achieve Bankai and an equal amount of time to train and master it. With Bleach having a convenient 10-year time skip at the end of the series, it may mean that Kenpachi by chapter 685 may well have mastered his Bankai, and there's every opportunity that we may see it in action during the Hell arc, which is actually set 12 years after the events of the 1000-year Blood War arc where Kenpachi had first activated his Bankai. Bankai. Because of their very different backgrounds, this creates another interesting wildcard. Kenpachi's hundreds of years of combat experience across the Soul Society has exposed him to numerous fighting styles and supernatural abilities. This experience could prove to be crucial in adapting to Broly's power. Perhaps the most overlooked factor in this fight is their different motivations. Kenpachi fights for the thrill of battle, while Broly, despite his tremendous power, lacks any inherent desire for combat. This psychological aspect could manifest in different ways, as Kenpachi's battle-seeking nature may lead him to unconsciously draw out the fight, giving Broly's exponential growth more time to overwhelm him. Meanwhile, Broly's reluctance to fight unless pushed to his limits could actually work in his favor, as his full potential typically emerges only in response to genuine threats. Also, their different approaches to fighting may prove to be decisive, as Kenpachi's tendency to just stand there and deliberately let himself get hit in order to create openings may actually backfire catastrophically against him, because I think legendary Super Saiyan Broly's attacks operate on a scale that has been rarely seen within Bleach aside from transcendent beings like Sosuke Aizen, Ichibei, Yhwach, or even Dangai Ichigo. So after having comprehensively broken down both of these characters, let's finally see how Kenpachi and Broly measure up across all of these different combat stats, as I'm about to determine the winner in this fight. In terms of combat dynamics, Broly's continuous evolution during battle creates an impossible challenge. His ability to shatter dimensional barriers through his sheer force and his rapid ability to adapt to new threats sets him apart, while Kenpachi's ability to cut through anything initially poses a threat against Broly's defenses. The Saiyan's exponential power growth would eventually overcome any of Kenpachi's attacks. Kenpachi's combat experience does shine through in this stat, but Broly's natural battle genius would allow him to close the gap with frightening speed. So in terms of raw combat, Broly is definitely the winner. In terms of tactical mastery, both of them have demonstrated remarkable combat intelligence. Both of them have insane battle instincts as well as the ability to adapt and grow mid-fight, but Broly's ability to not just mimic but improve upon existing abilities that he has only seen once does demonstrate that he has a level of raw talent and genius that exceeds even Kenpachi. And then you have his Saiyan genes, which allow him to grow stronger with each battle, further exponentially increasing his learning curve to unprecedented levels. So in terms of intellect and strategy, Broly is the winner. In terms of their durability, you have Kenpachi's Reiatsu enforced body versus Broly's ever-evolving defenses. While Kenpachi has proven to be able to withstand attacks from opponents who are stronger than captain level, and he has proven to be able to survive the vacuum of outer space, I believe that Broly's defensive capabilities scale with his power, eventually reaching a point where he can withstand reality-shattering attacks from Gogeta. And then you have his hour-long battle with the incredibly powerful Golden Frieza, which proves that not only does his durability increase with his power, but his stamina does too, thus making Broly the victor in this stat. In terms of raw power, Kenpachi's Bankai offers him an incredible power boost, but it's restricted by the limits of his own body, as he risks self-destruction in order to channel this power, while comparatively Broly's transformations have no upper limit, like I've said several times. I do think that Broly's ability to continuously evolve would outpace any growth that Kenpachi would have, even from his Bankai transformation. So in terms of raw power, again, Broly takes it. And then you have the potential wild card which each of the characters have. So Kenpachi's Bankai renders him mindless with power, while Broly's training under Goku has granted him increasing mastery over his transformations. You have to remember that the only time we saw Kenpachi's Bankai was during the 1000-year Blood War arc, and this was an unrefined early version of it. I'm certain that during that 10-year time skip leading up to the epilogue of Bleach, Kenpachi would have certainly gained control over his Bankai form, thus allowing him to retain his sanity while in that transformation. If Kenpachi can in fact retain his sanity while in his Bankai form, It may prove to be a decisive wild card to beat Broly, but because we haven't seen this yet, I do think that Broly once again wins in this stat, as he has actually been able to demonstrate that he is trying to maintain his sanity through his different transformations under the mentorship of Goku. I did run a community poll where I'd asked all of you who would win in a one-on-one fight, Kenpachi Zaraki or Broly. The results are conclusive, as 64% of people think that Broly will win, while Kenpachi had only received 36% of votes. Again, this is mostly because of the legendary Super Saiyan's ability to continuously evolve and adapt in battle. While in an actual fight between the two of them, Kenpachi may win the early rounds and would definitely draw his opponent's blood first. I think that as the fight would progress, Broly would continuously evolve to a point where Kenpachi just wouldn't stand a chance. The only way for him to actually win would to land a decisive, powerful blow, which would need to knock Broly out before he has the chance to grow stronger. What do you guys think? Do you believe that Kenpachi's battle experience would allow him to find an opening in Broly early in their fight, or does the legendary Super Saiyan's limitless potential make this an easy win for him? I do have other power scaling videos on the channel, like I did a fun Itachi vs Aizen video, which was actually the first power scaling matchup video that I did, and honestly I really enjoy making this content, so I would love to know all of your future suggestions in the comments for what versus matchups you would like to see me break down in the future. I can compare combatants from different series, or even fighters from the same series who had never fought in their respective universes. So do let me know your recommendations in the comments. But for now, if there was anything that I've forgotten to mention about Kenpachi or Broly, then I'd love to know all of your thoughts. Do you agree with my final verdict that Broly would be the victor in this matchup? I look forward to reading all of your thoughts in the comments, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.